I'm Robert Gowan. Thanks for joining Mentors Military, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Kyle Neal. How are you guys?
We're sitting here at Pearl and Pine Brewery. They've graciously offered us the ability to come into the studio and sit down here and obviously be able to put on this show. So we really appreciate them in doing that. And today we're joined by two special people here. So Phil Sussman and Jared Rinehart. So thank you both. Phil, this is your third time.
This is number 3.
Yeah. It's been a while since you were on. We covered a little bit of it, a highlight when you came on with your brother on the second episode, but jump back, kind of do an overview, a little bit about your backstory and everything. That'll be helpful, and then we'll do the same for you, Jared, maybe.
Cool. So my name is Phil Sussman. I was in the Army. I was a Cav Scout, and then I went to Special Operations Civil Affairs following that. You go further back, I was a photojournalism student in Boston University back in 2006 and decided I wanted to be a war photographer. So I took a job with a small agency in Jerusalem. And I had a $24 a month apartment with a bunch of immigrants, and I had a bus pass, and I'd go to the West Bank, and I'd travel around taking pictures for the agencies. Ended up covering war with Hezbollah up north in Lebanon, and came home and had the war bug. I had the conflict bug, and I wanted to get back to it. So I ended up working for the Army for a year as a contractor up at Fort Lewis. I worked for the Northwest Guardian. I left that and decided I wanted to finally start doing it and be on the other side of the camera. That's when I joined the Army. Commissioned out of University of South Florida in 2012. Went to Fort Carson, spent some time as a cavalry officer. Had some difficult experiences in my service and broke my back in 2015 when I was a couple weeks out from CAS, from Civil Affairs Assessment and Selection. Had a hasty rehab, ended up going back to selection at about 60% passed. Got through it, went to Civil Affairs Brigade, had a couple deployments, Jordan and Syria. Somewhere in that mix around 2017, I started a company called American Yogi. Part of my rehab from my back was yoga and meditation and mindfulness. And I decided I wanted to spread that to as many people as I could in our community that maybe would have never seen that sort of wellness as an option. So I continued that throughout my career. I medically retired about a year and a half, 2 years ago at this point. Continued to run the company, became a stay-at-home dad. Last time I was on the show, I think I was in the process of getting out. Now I've been a veteran for a little while now, and I feel like I'm a vastly different person since I got out. I've done a lot of healing. I spent time with heroic hearts down in Peru and Mexico, and started working closely with them. And now I'm here to spread healing and love as far as I can, man.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. What a great story, too, because, each time that you came on, I've noticed a different step in your journey, in your process, so I can't wait to hear more about this part of it, for sure. So, Jared.
Well, first, thanks for having me on here. This is incredible. I'm really, really stoked to really be here. So, awesome. So I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, and during that time in the Marine Corps, I had 2 different jobs. I was security forces stationed out of NBK Bangor in Washington State, where I guarded special assets and the subs out there. I eventually got transferred duty stations to 2-7, where my primary job as a machine gunner. I did not deploy to Afghanistan or Iraq for that time frame, which at the time, as a grunt, man, I hated that. It was like I was training for the big game and never got my opportunity. So when I got out of the Marine Corps in 2011, I had a huge chip on my shoulder about my service because I didn't feel like I got to serve in the war I wanted to fight in. So like most of us, I was drinking a lot. I was grew a huge beard, was trying to fight everyone, and I couldn't hold relationships, couldn't hold job. So the only thing I could really think about doing was getting back into that lifestyle, but I didn't really want to go back into the Marine Corps. So I became a private contractor for about 4 years. So I was back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan for basically a 4-year period. During that time frame, when I was a contractor, I would come home on leave, so I'd be gone for probably about 10 to 11 months overseas, and I'd come back for like a month or 2 months for leave. And during that time frame, like most contractors probably out there, I don't want to speak for everybody, but for me, I partied really hard when I got home. I had all this money in my pocket, and I wasn't going to do anything, so I partied with my friends really hard. And during that time frame, they not just with the drinking and women and everything else that I was doing. My friends would be like, hey, let's do a psychedelic at the end of your time home. And so I would try different psychedelics with my friends and stuff at that time, and I had a pretty profound experience on one of these occasions that led me to start researching into plant medicine and what it could do to help me, because I had this huge shift in experience. So I went back out to Iraq and researched all about this thing called ayahuasca, and then I found a center that was in the depths of Peru. It was in the Ucayali region of Peru, and had a 9-day retreat. Completely altered my concept of my life, about people in it, reality itself, in such a positive and profound way. And I went back to Iraq actually after that experience, and for about 10 months, and integrated out there with the team. And then after that 10 months, I decided, I was like, this life isn't really for me anymore, and I think I'm ready to go into the next step. And I still was not ready to go back to the States, so I went back to the Amazon jungle to work with this plant medicine again, and decided to stay out there. So I lived in the Amazon for a year with the Shipibo tribe down in Pucallpa, Peru, and worked at a center to help people through this plant medicine process. And after the end of that year, I met Jesse Gould, who started Heroic Hearts project, and then he told me, hey man, I'm starting this nonprofit and I'm gonna need help. And I was like, anything you need, man. And so about a year after that, I became a coach, and now we've been doing this since 2017. So we're on the growth, and that's how it got me on this podcast.
Well, I had no idea that it's been around since 2017.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 6 years in the process. So, but how long again was it prior to that time frame that you had been looking into this? It was like 2 years, you said, or about that, a little over?
So I started getting, I guess, into the psychedelic space for probably like 3 years before that, but like it was mostly recreational. I didn't actually get a lot of the buzz all over the internet right now is about the therapeutic uses of this. And yes, that's possible, but I also didn't, like with my friends and at party scenes or like around a campfire or something, I didn't really get, I didn't get therapy out of it. I just kind of compartmentalized it as, I got really, really high with my friends, and then didn't think much of it. It wasn't until I had a DMT experience, which was so powerful that it really like shook me up, going like, what was that? Like what? And it led me to start researching more into this. But before that, before going to the jungle, I didn't really have a lot of experience outside of like the recreational side of psychedelics.
Let's spend a moment then talking about, because this is huge, and Kyle and I have talked about it within our community now, where a lot of guys are searching for the healing. And one of the things that we talked about is that we're not going to sit here and say, hey, this is something for everybody or anything like that. That what we want to do in this show is really lay out the facts, what people are doing, how it's personally benefited, those who've gone through the program, the kind of the do's and don'ts, and those types of things, and things that if people are going to go down this path who are off active duty and want to search something like this, I want to kind of get through the, what is that like, what does it look like and such. So let's talk about initially the idea or the concept. I'm not sure where it started, but everybody all of a sudden is looking at this as a healing method. I mean, we've gone from stellate ganglion blocks to yoga and therapy and mindfulness and breathing techniques, and I think they've done the magnetic aspects and everything. So obviously some therapies work for certain individuals, and they may work for a shorter period of times than others. But everybody's searching for maybe that key. The thing.
Yeah.
And so for you guys, what have you guys seen out there in that space as to that walk and that journey? I mean, Have you guys seen the same thing we have in terms of people kind of really trying to find that opportunity?
Yeah, we talk about it a lot. We were talking about this morning, the thing, what you feel inside and what you see inside is what you see in the world around you, right? So psychedelics weren't even on the horizon for me years ago. The first time that we spoke, it was about American Yogi and about all the healing I'd gotten through meditation and through yoga and through, mindfulness practices and books I've read and people I've spoken with. And I thought that was the key, and then I kept on in my journey, and then I thought, oh, cool, sound healing works as well. And was it EMDR, the therapy I was doing with my counselor, like that was working, that was the thing. But I never felt along that journey that part of me that needed to be extracted or evolved or transformed was really getting touched by the different modalities that I was trying. So when psychedelics came along, it wasn't something that I was seeking out. It was really something that found me. It wasn't like, oh, I'm hurting, what do I do? I was really in a place where I thought, I'm hurting, this is just how it's always going to be. Everything that I was doing in my practice, I'm a certified yoga instructor. I do meditation every day, and I have all these things, and I teach. I've taught thousands of people at this point, in the studio and retreats. But prior to psychedelics, I thought that I understood what those things meant. I thought I understood what they truly did for me. When I found psychedelics, or when psychedelics found me, it was Jesse Gould reached out to me towards, I guess, a few months after I got out of the Army. And I was in a terrible place. I didn't want to live anymore. There was a night where, I walked to the beach, I walked to the ocean, and I just stared out, and I just wanted to walk and then swim and then just keep swimming until I had no more energy. And so all of my practices, all of everything that I had done before that, while they were helping in the moment, there was still so much more beneath the surface that I couldn't access, and I didn't know what that answer was. And then when Jesse reached out to me, it was almost as if he knew, he called me, and I knew that I needed to answer the phone. And then when I found psychedelics, my world, and we'll talk about that in a minute, how
so
my
what
world
was it
expanded,
specific? Yeah, what was it specifically that he said to you that, really was like, wow, okay, this is not something I'd ever thought about,
There's
was
gotta
it
be something, because if you offer this and you're like, okay, this is a big step
Yeah.
for somebody.
'Cause
So
it's-
what was it that made you like
Yeah.
go
Here's
over?
the funny thing, right? Nothing.
Ah.
He said, do you want to go to Peru and do ayahuasca? And that was it. I was in such a place where I tried everything. I'd been on every antidepressant. I'd been on every, there was a time in the Army when I was on, I was on Ativan and Clonopin and alpha blockers, beta blocker, Zoloft, all those things. I tried everything. And so when someone reached out with, here's another thing, he didn't even say like, this is going to change your life. You're going to cure your post-traumatic stress. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be hard. Nothing. It was just, do you want to come heal in Peru? And I said, yes.
So it kind of sounds like you were obviously on the beach. You were kind of towards your wits' end there. So you just felt like this was. Did you have that lifeline feeling like?
Yeah,
This is like the kind of the last thing.
100%. I had been hurting for so long. I had been in pain for so long. And it was a deep pain. It was a scratch in the marrow of my soul. And I thought, honestly, I was at the point I didn't want to live with it anymore. I was tired of being in pain. I could put on a face for everyone I needed to, but I couldn't for myself.
So Jared, like the same question. Like, were you on that same timeline? Do you feel like that was like your last effort, or was that more of a? You almost feel lucky that you found it when you did.
So when I first got a lot of benefit from working with psychedelics, I actually didn't know that I needed healing.
Okay.
I actually thought that I was, I was a contractor. I had a cool job. I was strong. I was still in my Marine mindset. So I hadn't really started to register that I was like, the whole world is fucked up, and I'm the one that's okay, and everything else is just sucks. So when I received it, it was almost like I had no idea how much pain I was actually in until it was gone.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, across the board with most of the veterans that I work with in this space, they have tried everything, and they have run the gambit through the VA, and they have run the gambit through all types of therapies, and most of them are at this point where they're saying, "I'll try anything." So you give this, yeah, sure, I'll try it. Yeah, sure, I'll try it. With a healthy dose of skepticism, because they have tried everything, saying like, I've tried everything, it's only scratched the surface, or it's helped a little bit, or it's made me feel like a zombie or whatever, but I'll try it because because my life's falling apart. And
I think that's important to tell, though. That's part of the story that everyone, it seems like it's kind of a normal, natural take on it is let's be a little bit skeptical about this. And if you're not skeptical about your therapy or what you're doing to make yourself better, is it really going to benefit? So I think that's important to let everybody know that if you are skeptical, just the research is there. Just continue to do the research until you either say yay or nay.
Yeah, I think that skepticism is also respect. Having
Absolutely.
respect for the process, respect for the
Absolutely.
medicine, respect for the healing.
Well, yeah, and we've had enough snake oil salesmen talk about healing and everything else, and I went into this space extremely skeptical, and I wouldn't take anybody's word for it. One of the reasons I went down to the jungle was because I was like, no one in the West knows what's going on down there, so I have to go find out what this is and what is the real thing and what's the hippie BS that I keep hearing from people. And
So what was the name of the Shipibo tribe?
yeah, the Shipibo tribe.
Okay. So how was that year with them? And was there anything other than the ayahuasca or the DMT that you did that you thought helped as well? Maybe from their culture or something?
We did all kinds of things down there. So we worked with all types of purgative medicines, and I say purgative meaning like they help release a lot of like energy in you, which involves vomiting or going to the bathroom or whatever. So I worked with ayahuasca, I worked with San Pedro, I worked with Kambo, I worked with Hape, and I did plant dietas, which, so in the Shipibo culture, the thing was, is I expected I was gonna go down there and get like a left seat, right seat version of this is how we do it, and you just follow this person and you will learn from them. So when I went down there and I wanted to learn about ayahuasca, they said, you need to drink a lot of ayahuasca. Like to do that, like we can't teach you. You have to do it yourself, and
That makes sense.
which makes sense. But I was like, okay, so and they basically told me the plants will teach you. And at the same time, I was skeptical because I'm like, plants teaching me things. Okay, like come on. But as I started working in that culture and doing these things that they call plant dieta or plant diets, there is a lot of subconscious information that comes from working with these certain plants or these certain things that I cannot explain. Some stuff that would make most Westerners skin crawl, saying like, okay, that's just the whole reason I went down there was because it doesn't make any sense to us out here. Like, how does a plant teach you things? But so I've dieted tobacco and bobenzana, and during those diets, I had some really profound dreams and like epiphanies and realizations that came into my life that was kind of like a mix that if I wasn't doing this diet and doing these things, I don't know if these things would have came up. I was too distracted, or I was there was too much going on in my head. So this process that they do for diet is you go into an isolation for anywhere from like 8 days to a month, depending on how long you're doing it. And you're in this like hut in the middle of the jungle, and you don't see anybody, and you are eating very, very little, and you basically are having maybe one meal a day with like rice and some steamed vegetables at that most. And then you're having a little bit of this plant, they'll either mix the root in some water, or you're just nibbling on a piece of the plant itself. And then you sit out there in isolation for those times, and the only person that you see is the healer or the shaman who comes and basically checks on you, or you go out to ceremony with them. So you're coupling this with doing ayahuasca ceremonies during your isolation, and the ayahuasca helps to open up that space. So yeah, there was tons of stuff that came out of me working in Peru, and I learned a lot about my diet, like what food was doing to my body itself. Like, it's so hard to eat actually correct in the United States because, I mean, you can't get a vegetable without seeing like what other products they put in vegetables. Yeah. Like like we call organic food like what my grandparents would just call food, you know? So like it's very hard to eat like correct, and we don't know what that's doing to our consciousness, but out there it's all fresh food. So just getting that aspect, I got to see what was going on. But so like there was plenty of things, but mostly what I got as far as from this was a deep sense of mindfulness. Like, this really calmed me and quieted me down enough to start to notice how I was responding to things and how I would think about things, and helping people with their own healing started helping me to start working on my own healing. So it was really just a all-encompassing thing that really helped. Now, I don't think that everyone needs to go spend a year in Peru to get healed. You can have an experience and still integrate it back into this life here and have a tremendous amount of healing that comes from these experiences. But
Now, would you recommend coupling this with other therapies?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that the sweet spot for us as Westerners, since we're so very frontal lobe about a lot of stuff, are very logical, is to mix these things with like traditional therapies.
Talk therapies and stuff like that. Okay.
And I don't mean like during the experience.
Yeah, no.
I mean like before and after
Yeah.
the experience, letting the experience be what it is, but having some sort of guide or person that you can unpack this with and start to really integrate it back into your life is crucial for the process.
So that initial period was just more of like, I think there's a bit of, if I use the word purging probably goes across the full spectrum of the experience in total. But the first part was to purge at least any toxins and things that may be within our foods or those types of things, as well as, like you said, give you mindfulness where you can start focusing internally. Do you feel like the food also kind of, maybe the food deprivation caused this sense of, because it does when you get food and sleep deprivation, a sense of focus in a way, sometimes good, sometimes, you're right on the razor's edge as well. So it can also cause additional issues, hallucinations and,
Absolutely.
Guys have been to ranger school talk about seeing all kinds of crazy things.
Absolutely. I do think that the food deprivation does increase your sensitivity. Just like if you don't eat salt or sugar
I was going to say that.
Right.
and then suddenly you have a salty food, your palate just, whoa, that's a lot of salt. So that's actually the idea behind these dietas that they would do, is they're trying to make you much more sensitive to that plant itself.
Strip you down to the basics.
Strip you down to the bases, so that way you can really pick up on the nuances of what is happening chemically or emotionally, or in some cases they would say plant spirits, so spiritually with that plant, and get these messages. And a lot of these times, these dreams that you would get in these spaces would give you like insight on what's going on inside of you. And I think and fasting has been a part of human civilization for thousands of years, and people swear by it. We now think that like intermediate fasting now is a new age. It's not. We've been doing this for a long time, and yogis in the East have been doing fasting for a very long time to have spiritual connections or dive deep within themselves. So this is just a 1,000-some-year practice that the Shipibo have been doing to basically connect with these plants as well. And each one of these plants has different personalities with different things that will teach them certain things. Like Bobenzana, for instance, the plant that I work with is a compassion, heart-opening plant. So it really helps you dive into your childhood and helps you dive into more things about compassion and love in your life. And so the dreams that I was having with Bobenzana were very wrapped around my childhood and everything else. Now, for the skeptic out there, just like I'm skeptical, like knowing this knowledge also could have inspired those dreams. But either way, it was a real experience for me. Like, I know that maybe my subconscious was saying, I'm supposed to have dreams about my childhood right now. But the lessons that I learned were stuff I had forgotten about what it was like to feel like a kid, or things that were much deeper in there. So this is something we can get into as well, about intention behind what you're doing can really drive or push you into what experience you're looking for.
Did you have any kind of like medical blood work or anything done prior in order to see like a baseline?
No, I wish I would have, though, for my scientific also side of my brain to see what's going on. But there are plenty of studies out there that we are participating in as well that that are looking at gut biome, that are looking at blood, that are looking at what's going on in the brain. We're looking at all this stuff, and those studies are starting to come out now. And I wish I would have had, like, this is what my blood looked like then, or this is what was going on at that point. There was a lot of trust and also a lot of naive, like I was really naive kind of moving into it, and I was like, well, I'll try this, and they've been doing this for a long time, and I'll trust it. We'll see what works.
Yeah, you know, the gut part is like is why I asked about that. You know, first to give the baseline and the fact that you're purging yourself of the salt, of the sugars, of the toxins and stuff that may even be in the herbicides or whatever that's been applied, and you know, all that kind of stuff. So having a baseline of saying this is where I was, and wow, when I came back, this is how it differed in terms of what you took. Because I mean, you think about pure medicine and medicine that's given over the counter that people, because a doctor prescribes it, it means that it's okay. But what we don't know in many cases is necessarily how it's affecting your individual body, because through the study that they provided, it was usually a white male, you know, of some age group and demographic, but they didn't go full across the whole spectrum and across different DNA types and everything else. So what you don't know is what receptors it's turning on or off within your individual body. And that's why some people can take a drug and it affects them very differently, including aspirin, ibuprofen, and simple stuff like that, versus somebody else. And so I think that's why I asked you, like, you know, where was it that you were, and then when you started seeing these effects, I think that would have been helpful, certainly. But I also wonder, like, back then you were in the very early stage of this whole process, because I personally, and maybe this has been around within the community for some time frame, but it seems like it's been more prevalent, I would say, in the last 18 to 24 months than ever.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so do you kind of attribute that, or think that that might be more just because the awareness of the individuals that are going and coming back?
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
I think we're seeing it more in the community because more outspoken voices are trying plant medicine and are being outspoken about it. You know, and you know, where prior, you know, when I started American Yoga, he was talking about bringing yoga out the dark. You know, and now yoga, you know, 6-7 years later, yoga is really common in, you know, soft community, the conventional, you know, Army community, military as a whole, the veteran community. And I feel like psychedelics is kind of in that same space. You know, a few years ago, it was very under the table, and you know, now the guys that were trying to bring those voices out, where it's okay not to be hyper masculine all the time, are saying, hey, it's okay to try these new modalities. You know, try this medicine and tell people about it and show people, you know, the effects of it. And I think, and Heroic Hearts is really good about that too, because they pull people in that are outspoken about their struggle and are outspoken about their journey, and give them a way to start healing. And then those people with the voices they had prior have evolved, but are still the same level. You know?
Yeah, I first did this in 2016, and when I came back in 2016, coming back meaning like going back to my contract in Iraq, I was surrounded by contractors and veterans on my team, and they were all interested to hear about what I was saying, but they had no idea about any of this stuff, and they were very skeptical. And so I feel like from when I first started all this, it was very underground. It was very hush. I don't want to even say hush. It was just, there was a lot of stigma behind it. Yeah. People imagine psychedelics to be like, oh, love and light and all this stuff, and veterans and service members themselves were really turned off by a lot of that. We think it's just like they're burying their head in the sand. I actually remember when I showed up to my retreat center, I had just left Iraq, and I showed up to my retreat center in Peru, and everyone that's facilitating there was so lovely, but they were hippies, you know, like hardcore hippies. And I'm like, and I'm looking around, and I literally just got back from just got out of this contract, and I'm like, these hippies have no idea what the world is actually like. Like, these people are so naive. Their heads must be buried. They're out here doing a bunch of psychedelics in the jungle. They have no idea what the world is actually like. And after my retreat, I actually started seeing them not like hippies, but people. Started actually getting to know them and seeing that they weren't as naive as I thought they were, and that like my perspective was pretty skewed. But so like getting past that stigma with veterans has been difficult, but I think, Phil, you're absolutely right. It's people, not just veterans, but people coming out of the psychedelic closet, so to speak, and saying like, hey, this really helped me. And then not just that, but people in their communities seeing the results. It's not just someone saying, oh, I'm healed and this stuff is happening, but people who haven't done the experience are saying like, man, my brother, my sister, my dad, my mom, it really helped them.
Seeing somebody have demonstrated success. I think of like Sophie Allaire, like she goes and does it. I mean, she's super successful, climb Mount Everest, like all that good stuff. Like she's a uber successful person who did this checkup with herself really, and came back and is still enabled herself for success, even with this great knowledge that she has of her own thoughts and her own mind at this point too. It's almost like putting another tool in your kit bag.
Oh, absolutely.
If you do it correctly and you do it safely and you've done your research and you do the things that you're supposed to do that you would do with anything. Like if you're going to a doctor, you're not just going to pick some doctor.
I think you nailed it though. That's the key is, like we talked about set and setting, making sure you're doing it under the right or safe circumstances, not the right, but safe circumstances. And with research, the kind of the double-edged sword of the popularity, at least from my foxhole, what I'm seeing, you see the rise in popularity of psychedelics. And remember a few years ago, it was CrossFit, and then it's cold plunges, and it's jiu-jitsu, and all these things. I know, like I jumped back into jiu-jitsu. Like I was a wrestler back in the day, and then I wanted to do jiu-jitsu, and it was something kind of in the mainstream that came my way, and it's like, oh, I'll try it. The double-edged sword of it, where it's great. Here's another way we could heal. The danger is that it becomes, maybe it's too easy for entry, and you walk into it maybe unprepared because you think, oh, everybody does it, so I'm going to take a bunch of mushrooms and I'm going to heal. But it can go so far south, doing it without proper, I guess, steps in place, without the proper environment in place and support in place. So the danger is, I think, it becoming too, I don't even know if access is the right word for it, but too a commonplace where, like smoking a cigarette or something.
I can definitely see that being a problem. And here in especially America, we're probably looking at it, and our society has always looked at things like that's taboo. That's, LSD, shrooms, everything else back in the day was something that was a period in time in the 70s or whatever have you, or so it was a very different, type of mindset. Yet, there was a period of time when I think a lot of that was actually being used by medicine to treat people until, it was then received very differently. So now people are going outside of the country in order to get healing that they otherwise couldn't get here. But if tomorrow all of a sudden physicians started doing this inside the office, and you would go to a center that was controlled by physicians in America, everybody would be like, oh yeah, that's perfectly legit. Everything's great. And so you got to think about that as an individual who's listening or watching this, about what is your threshold? What is it that you're looking for? And at your stage, it sounded more like, I didn't even go there. It was more of, will it help? And I'm there. I'm all in, type of thing. And so, I think that's what people who are listening who don't understand that part, Phil, maybe need to understand, is that when you reach that level, you're just looking for something other than the spot that you're within. And those who have never experienced that, it may be difficult to understand that deep depression, like you were mentioning somebody's name earlier, that was not even combat. That is stress and trauma from early childhood. That individual is trying to work on, Sophie, and trying to heal herself. Whereas yours is combat, and most of the guys we've seen.
It's complex, right? It's an onion. The first time I went down to the jungle, it was to purge my pain, to purge my darkness, to purge, first ceremony, I'm diving into survivor's guilt. Like the very first thing of the first ceremony, after I drink, the first thing comes to my mind is just crying. Like I heard a voice that said, you're here. It's okay because you're here. But they're not. And then I lost it. And that week became about purging that guilt, purging that shame, purging that darkness and the pain that I've been healing, or I've been putting myself through. But as my journey has gone on, It hasn't all been about combat. It hasn't all been about my time overseas. It's actually, you kind of push that out of the way, and then you start dealing with your childhood, and then you start dealing with your relationships, and you start dealing with your family, and you start dealing with yourself and your own hangups and why you're this way, and what hurts that you want to try to push away. And you know, something else you talked about before is it's not all combat vets. You know, you have military sexual trauma. You have even, you know, I went through a stretch, we talked about this in past episodes, I lost 3 guys in a matter of a couple months in training accidents, guys getting sliced in half, guys getting burned in the striker, guys getting paralyzed, guys, I mean, you don't have to go to combat to be traumatized. You know, you don't have to be in special operations to be traumatized. There's no standard for trauma. And the great thing about psychedelics is they don't care. The plant doesn't care where you gained your trauma from.
It's not like snaking through you trying to find the military trauma.
Yeah, sorry, we won't treat you unless it's
which way to
combat
the
related.
front, you know? So yeah, so it started that from that depth, but you know, at the same time, you don't have to be, you know, wanting to die to do psychedelics necessarily. You know, like for me, that's what I needed, and that being able to walk through that door, you know, not just stare at the door of, you know, of this pain and healing, but to walk through it, now start exploring and now start wading through the waters. And now, you know, I went down to Mexico a couple months ago, and it wasn't about combat at all. You know, those ceremonies were in my soul, were down to, you know, the child inside of me, bringing him back out.
So what about like the Native American tribes here in America? I mean, in early days and stuff, I mean, they talked a lot about, you know, at least from my experience of reading and everything else, about plants, to understand why each plant is here, what it's doing, you know, how it's connected to the total, you know, God or the being, you know, is there for connectivity. It's all of that. What I think I'm hearing, at least from everybody that's gone to South America, is somewhat similar, you know, experience in terms of understanding, and maybe that's what you learned and gained in that year of understanding plant medicine means the plants have always been here. They can be used for good, for harm, or whatever, and they have different, you know, some you shouldn't even take at all, or, you know, shouldn't even mess with or anything, because they'll kill you. That's what I mean. But then other things have other purposes, right? So did you go through any of that type of thing while you were there? And
I struggle with a lot of I was pretty anti-drug when I was in the Marine Corps. Anybody who smoked pot to me was just evil. Yeah, I think that's how it was to me at the time. It was just like it was a stupid idea. Why do this and everything else? Because at my point, I was still a part of that DARE generation where all drugs are bad.
yeah.
And I tell a lot of my conservative friends and non-conservative friends out there who are still on this hang-up about what a good or bad drug is. And I said, there's no such thing as a good or bad gun either. Just good, bad users. People who use it for certain things. It's just tools. So all these plants, whether they, and one of the things that the maestro I worked with told me, he said that the difference between poison and medicine is a matter of dosage and frequency. So everything can be a medicine. Everything can be a poison as well. It just depends on, you know, the dosage and the frequency of use and why you're using it. So it's a matter of really broadening our perspective and seeing that these things are tools to be used, and certain tools, can be very harmful if you're not using them right. I mean, like, you've been around a construction site, you can say that too. Like, man, everything is a zombie apocalypse weapon here. So like, it's just a matter of who's using it, what their intention is behind it, and like, how are they using it? And I think that's where it comes to, and that's where I think we're hearing a lot of these, the scary stories about psychedelics is people were not using them correctly, just like the scary stories we're hearing about guns and other substances is people not using these tools correctly.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is the thing that's most concerning, right? Because a lot of the reasons why you set a standard and you place in controls is to make sure that there are left and right boundaries and people are not going out there to try to abuse it in some way for their own benefit and gain. You know, like, yeah, give me $10,000 and we'll ship you down to Peru and you're going to be healed and you're going to come back and you're going to be a better person and everything. And so, I mean, it's in a way having it under the surface, hidden and not well known, but yet it's kind of known in certain circles, is almost better, because then those who are going through it are going through a smaller sample size in targeted areas. But once it becomes more known, that's when the really concern should be there in a lot of ways, because people will abuse it if they get the opportunity, you know.
And we're at a really interesting point with this movement happening in the United States, because this is a good opportunity for us to set a standard of what is that safety net, what is those left and right lateral limits, and how do we do that? So that way, it's kind of like we all have a label on our Tylenol bottle that says, do not take more than this, and if you go above that and you hurt yourself, it was obviously listed right there, the education is there. It's not about abstinence, it's not about demonizing the things, it's really about learning how to educate. The same thing I would say about gun safety, right? Like, people are going to misuse guns who are not educated. People are going to misuse tools that are not educated to use them. You go on a work site, you learn how to use these tools properly. You also learn if you do this, it's going to hurt you, or it's going to hurt somebody else. So we don't have that with psychedelics because of the prohibition of them. Like, it's the standard in the United States has not been, let's learn about these things, the right way of using them. It's just don't do that. And as we've found with any prohibition in the United States, it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. We abuse it, we harm it, and then we demonize the thing because we don't know how to use it properly.
Yeah. Let's talk a minute then about like the use of the tool, the medicine in its use. How do I know where to go or how to find this type of thing that's out there that I know that I can trust? And how do I know, or what risk, I guess, especially if I'm a risk intolerance, I don't want a whole lot of risk. How do I know, or how do I gain enough confidence? How am I trying to say this? How do I gain enough confidence that what I'm getting ready to go into?
Where would you start to find the credible resources to start your research?
For myself, I would say that online is a good way of looking at it, and because people are pretty open about their experiences. If you find a circle in your local community, they're all doing mushrooms or something like that, and they advertise for healing. Ask around about that place and their practices, and understand that some people, it may be their first time with that place and they may be really enamored with how that goes, but there should be safety mechanisms put involved. Like, if you're going to do this, make sure that you are in a controlled environment where that way you feel safe. If you do not feel safe at all, you should not do it. Like, you should not, if anything in the process of leading up to it brings you like, oh, I don't feel safe with these people, you shouldn't go do it. They should be able to be open and honest about their practices and what they do. If it's costing a lot of money for very little benefit, for instance, that's another red flag to me. If someone's saying, "Hey, pay me $10,000 and I'll give you a mushroom ceremony," like that to me is a red flag that their intention behind it is not to help you; it's to make money. So it is saturated out there and it's very hard to find. So I think the first place to start looking is really online, and most of the ones that have pretty reputable or professional looking websites and stuff will have these common practices that they will have, and that will give you a baseline for these things. So like there's certain nonprofits out there now for veterans, for instance, if you're a vet listening to this, that you can look into that have these established lines, and they will be very upfront and apparent. This is our process, this is how we do things, this is our program, as opposed to come out for a weekend and do psychedelics and we're going to keep it quiet because we don't want the feds to find out.
Right. When you went down there, Phil, what was like going through your mind at the moment? Were you trying to go down there again with mindfulness of just being open to the experience, or what types of hesitation? And then what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, I'll happily talk about that. I was scared. I was just terrified. I went down there with just fear, because I knew fear of myself, fear of what I'd see and feel. I knew what I was hiding. I knew my skeletons. And Jared was my coach before I went down, my integration coach before I went down to Peru, and he actually had to talk me into going one day. I was having like a really hard day. I was having a tough time with my family, and I said, this is just too much for me right now. And it was fear. It was fear that was stopping me. But he, talked me through it and got me off the ledge and reminded me how much I needed this and how much I wanted it. So I went down there. I took a picture. I always show everyone when I talk about my experience. I took a before and after picture. My before picture was right before before I got in the car to drive to the airport, and I was angry. I was just pissed. I was angry at the world. I was angry at myself. I hated everything about myself and the things around me and what I was feeling. And it was a front for fear. It was a front for, fear of the unknown. I'd spent essentially 20 years. I think it was 18 years from the time I got back from Israel. And the first time, as soon as I got back, I started drinking heavily when I got home. I went over as a single person. I experienced combat as a single person. I had no unit, I had no buddies around me to commiserate with. I had no preparation for combat. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was outside of Gaza with a bunch of tanks ready to cross the border, and then a couple soldiers got killed up north, and the photographer I was with asked me if I wanted to go see a gunfight. And I said yes, and we just started driving to the north. And so I came home and I was wrecked. So I then systematically for the next 18 years stayed high. When I was in the military, we were always drinking, whether it was during work, after work. When I was, I would drink, I would take whatever pills they would give me, anything I could do, anything over the counter or not, to numb myself from feeling all the things I needed to feel. And I got used to being in a constant state of intoxication. And I didn't realize this till after I took the medicine and I started looking back at my journey. But I knew that I had a lot in me. I would separate for days and weeks, and I would shut down my wife and shut down my family, and I couldn't talk to anyone for days at a time. So I knew that going down there, I intentionally didn't research ayahuasca. I didn't want to know a thing about it. I didn't want to hear about any stories. I didn't want to hear what the experience was going to be like. I didn't want anything to cloud my experience. I wanted it to be mine and mine alone. So I went down there extremely scared. And the front for that was I can beat this. I can conquer the medicine. It's a fight just like anything else. And I got down there, and the medicine showed me pretty quickly that it was not to be won. It was not a game to be played. First ceremony, I go in there and, I'm a yogi. So I meditated so hard all day. I did all the yoga, I did all the journaling, and I was the picture of peace. I was the picture of mindfulness, and I'm ready to receive. And then I got in my first ceremony, and the medicine just started, I was a punching bag. The medicine just pushed me down to the floor and just held me down. And all that fear turned into discomfort. And I realized that the things that I feared were the things I needed to face most, and discomfort within myself was something that I was hiding for so long behind medication and alcohol. So then I received the gift of discomfort when I got to the jungle, and it was my introduction, like welcome to yourself. And it was really hard. But I woke up after my first ceremony. I woke up the next morning, and I was looking out of the jungle, and I turned and I was looking through a window, and I could just catch the reflection of my eyes, and I just started weeping, not bawling, it was a weeping, and tears started streaming down my face because I didn't recognize myself, in a beautiful way, like my eyes opened up, I felt like my face wasn't pulling down toward the earth as much, and it gave me confidence, like I knew what I was doing there. And the medicine showed me again that I had no idea, and there was like I thought that, okay, cool, I got so much healing done last night. This gee whiz, this is great. And then I had surprises, that I had another ceremony where the next day the shaman said, hey Phil, you had a big ceremony the first night. It was like going 10 rounds, over and over and over, dealing with, pulling things from my mind and making me face them. And I had a monster ceremony. The next day the shaman's like, chill today, you're good, don't be greedy with the medicine. And I spent the ceremony sitting with my thoughts for 4.5 hours. I just sat with my thoughts and my anger and my disconnection from the world. And the next morning I sat with Jesse, and Jesse read a poem that he wrote after ceremony, about being a warrior sets down his armor, and finding your softness and what it means to be a warrior now. And I lost it. I absolutely lost it. I realized all that anger was finally able, I was okay, I was safe. I was finally safe enough to let go, and I think that was the key for me. If I wasn't in that situation with veterans at the time, if I wasn't, down in the jungle of Peru where, everything was cut off, no electronics, no distractions, no nothing. And I had to look at myself, but I had to look at myself while I was being held at the same time. So I go into my last ceremony. That was the monster. That was, after spending 2 days meditating the hardest I can meditate and doing all the yoga and breathing, like I am great, I am grounded, I am love. I led everyone through this like beautiful breath and stretching before ceremony, and I sat down, I was like, this is gonna be amazing. I am full of so much love. This is gonna be, I figured it out. I got the cheat code to ayahuasca. And then I drank the medicine that night, and as he's pouring the medicine, you hear all the animals screeching and screaming at you. One of the animals was telling the shaman more, to give me more, so he kept on pouring more in the cup. And we were talking about earlier how guidelines and how much should someone take of something, or what should they take. And really my trust was in the shaman, and I found out later that he was giving me the absolute maximum amount of ayahuasca that he could give, that he knew I could take. So my last ceremony in Peru that week, that was the life changer. That was the moment that changed my life. All the fear and the pain and the darkness that I've been carrying, that I spent 18 years of just pain, 18 years of numbing myself, 18 years of incurring trauma on trauma on trauma, just packing it all down. And ayahuasca said to me, all right, you want to numb for 20 years, now you're going to feel it all. Now you're going to feel every single time you've ever numbed yourself to your pain. You're going to feel every single time that you were sad and you chose not to cry. You're going to feel every single time you walked away from your wife when you should have had a conversation. And that ceremony, that was the first time I ever I felt like I died. After I got back, I said I died in the jungle and was reborn. I didn't actually die, but I experienced my own death. I experienced my own death, and then I went to my own personal hell. And I had to live there infinitely. I had to experience what it felt like to live forever in a place with no time. A place that I was trapped in. This just hellscape of an environment that I needed. This is what I needed to see what I'd been doing to myself. Not to say that everyone that goes down there with pain, everyone that goes down there with post-traumatic stress, anyone that goes down there with combat trauma, whatever it is, that they won't necessarily go to this place. But this was the place that I created, I needed to see. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life, hands down, not even a close second. Nothing came close. Nothing would ever come close to that. And it was me. There was no external, there was nothing that was happening from the outside. It was me experiencing my own humanity that I'd created inside. And I had facilitators around me that could hold me. I went in that ceremony, I spent so long needing love. I spent so long feeling alone, and having experienced death and then being reborn. Jesse Gould I was in the bathroom with him of the ceremony space, because they had to move me away from everyone because I was so disruptive. I was thrashing and kicking and banging. One of our facilitators, he was a former fighter or MMA coach, and he had to bear hug me, and the shaman had to jump on top of me because 2 decades of pain were just coming out of me, and it was coming out in every way it could, just vomiting and yelling and crying and thrashing and kicking, marching my last steps out of me. And I'm just in the bathroom, holding on to Jesse's foot and just saying, I just need to hold your foot right now. I just need to feel like I'm not alone. I need to be grounded into this world, because I kept getting pulled down in my soul. I could feel it, like demons were pulling me down. And these men were bringing me back to life. These men were facilitating me back to myself. And after that ceremony, the fear was with me. It was a 7.5-7 hour ceremony, which is significantly longer than most. My whole body was numb by the end of it, because I was thrashed. I hadn't slept all week. I was sleeping maybe half hour to an hour a night after every ceremony, because I was just, I was thrashing and moving so much and clenching so much. I could feel the numbness go all the way up to my body, and by the end of the night, even my jaw started getting numb, so I could hardly move. And I was just trying to stay awake. I was trying to stay conscious. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to recover from this. Like nothing will ever be the same. Everything, I'm just scared. I had to take 2 headlamps, and I had to shine the headlamps on red light in the room, because I was afraid of the dark for days afterwards. I couldn't be alone. My roommate had just had him talk to me all night. I said, you just need to keep talking to me, because I can't look out in the darkness of the jungle right now. But I slept for about an hour and a half that night, and I woke up and I felt grace, and I felt reverence for the experience, and I felt gratitude, and I felt light. And it was like coming out of the maternity ward, you know, and I stepping into the world for the first time, and that pain was gone for the first time. That anxiety was finally gone for the first time. So, you know, I went back, and I that picture afterwards, the picture that I took before I left of that anger in my eyes, and my face is like scrunched up. And I had somebody take a picture of me because I wanted to compare it, and it's like looking at a different person, you know, when you put them side to side. And that was my first experience with it. I came back, and it changed everything.
Wow. Pretty heavy.
Extremely heavy, and then extremely light. Yeah.
What was your wife's reaction when you got home?
We cried a lot together.
Could she immediately know a difference?
Yeah, it was very apparent, and still, like, you know, Robert, you said you've seen my journey. Everyone that I haven't seen for a while, you know, when I see them, they can feel a change in me. They can see a change in me. You know, people that see pictures of me, you know, through American Yogi, they say, you just look different. When I got home to my wife, it was hard. So I kind of barricaded myself in my room for the first week. I didn't come out. I saw my kids, I put them to bed, but otherwise I didn't leave the room. The way that Jesse described it to me, he said it's kind of like a snake. You know, when a snake sheds its skin, it has to slither through these thorn bushes, these prickly patches to pull the skin off. But then once the skin comes off, you're bare. You know, you're naked to the world. The snake needs to grow its new skin, so it has to go under a rock, a nice cool rock to regrow. And that's kind of what happened to me. I walked through the thorns, I slithered through the thorns, and I came back, and I needed to hole up, and because you're very sensitive to the world, you're sensitive to everything, or I was very sensitive to everything around me. I was very energetically sensitive. But with my wife and my kids, because I have three little girls, they became my best teachers in my integration and my healing, because I was able to approach them in a way that I never could, and I was able to give them a side of myself I never could. You know, to be like bawling in my wife's arms was a really beautiful expression of our love and our relationship, and my own healing. And for my kids, you know, when they'd kick and scream at night, not want to go to bed, and, you know, act like little maniacs, for me just to sit with them calmly and hold them and give them space to go through what they needed to go through, it helped me heal as it helped them heal at the same time.
Did you guys ever have you and your wife, a conversation to help her understand that journey and where you've come to? Yeah.
I did a lot of apologizing.
Yeah.
When I got back, you know, I apologized for the things I put her through. I apologized for, you know, the things the secondary trauma that she incurred from my trauma, from the time we started dating. We started dating in 2006 when I got home from Israel. So she hasn't known me until 2 years ago as somebody that wasn't in pain from trauma. I did a lot of apologizing, but also the hard part that doesn't really get talked about, that Heroic Hearts is starting to do with Hope Project now, is integrating the families, the spouses into it as well. You know, when I got home from Peru, I was speaking a different language, essentially. Like, I had went to this other place, this other plane, and I'd gained this, you know, this knowledge, this wisdom, and this language. And when I would try to describe things to her, she wouldn't understand it. It's because she hadn't been there, and she hadn't received the dictionary. So what we did is, about 2-3 months later, she went down to Mexico with the Hope Project and Mission Within, and she was able to do psilocybin and 5-MeO DMT ceremony, and that allowed her to feel like she was closer to where I was coming back from my journey. Like, she understood a bit of that knowledge. You know, she felt what it feels like to be in a psychedelic state. She felt what it feels like to come into yourself. And that actually made us closer. And we've both continued the medicine journey together even through today. She's going to an ayahuasca retreat in a month.
So did she do that because of maybe some of the secondary post-traumatic stress placed on her from you, or from that and maybe previous trauma? What was her thought of going into that?
The initial thought was to help our marriage. Is, you know, it creates, when one partner goes, and this is just my experience, when one partner goes down or goes somewhere and does psychedelics, they come back a lot of times a different person, or changed in a lot of ways, and that created a bit of like a rift, a distance between us. So in order to start closing that gap, we realized she needed to understand. But at the same time, yes, at the same time, she had to go purge, from childhood. Her father died when she was 14 years old, and she never dealt with that. And she had to take on the weight, the family's weight, and through life, and then she ended up taking on a lot of my trauma. So it's a mix, right? Like I went down the first time to purge my trauma from overseas, and now I'm trying to cleanse my soul, and she's kind of on that same journey as well, I think.
Did you forgive yourself?
Did I forgive myself? I think I'm still in the process of forgiving myself. I think that's part of my journey. After my first ceremony, I was down to teach retreats, yoga and surfing retreats, really spiritual wellness retreats down in Guatemala. And I had a shaman. We were in a Mayan fire ceremony, and somebody asked if I wanted a cushion to sit on because I was fidgeting a lot. I broke my back, so I have arthritis and bulging discs. And I said, no, don't worry about it. I'm always in pain. And the shaman turned around and she said to me, what do you mean? What did you say? And I said, don't worry, I'm always in pain. She's like, that's a choice. That pain is a choice. So you're telling me right now. And as part of the process to get me to start dealing with that, she put me through like a forgiveness practice. So then every single day, from that time till I saw her 6 months later, I had to continue forgiving myself. I had to forgive myself for everything I could think of, from the time I was a little kid to that very day. So I spent a long time trying to forgive myself, and I didn't believe myself for a long time. I could say the words all day, but I still, I blamed myself for deaths. There was a soldier that I lost, and then I was on the recovery team for, and I put him down that path. I put him on that route. I should have done better reconnaissance, and I blame myself. I carried a lot of guilt. But it's also little things like raising my voice in my child. And I spent a long time not believing myself, and then suddenly something clicked one day, and I started to believe myself. And I think it was that constant, consistent practice with the self-work and the introspection. And now I can forgive myself. I also blame myself for a lot of stuff all the time. But I think I'm always, and may always be, in the process of forgiving myself.
At this point, we're going to take a little break.
Yeah.
Tune in 2 weeks for part 2.
I think some people may look at psychedelics and think, well, I'm just going to go down. I'll go down to Peru. I'll do ayahuasca. I'll come back. PTSD gone. I'm good. But it's a lot harder than that in a lot of ways. But there did get to a point when I realized I needed to go back.